Hello, we welcome you to our session on collaborative online groups. We're going to talk about intercultural partnerships that foster cultural competence. I'm Elizabeth Sandell, a professor in the College of Education at Minnesota State University, and I'm joined by two colleagues. I'll let each one introduce herself.
My name is Katie Archer Olson. I'm an associate professor and chair of paraprofessional education at Alaska Christian College in Soldotna, Alaska.
And hi, I'm Maria-Renee Grigsby, assistant professor at Minnesota State University, Mankato in the Elementary and Literacy Department. Institutions of higher education are emphasizing their capacity to foster equitable access, to incorporate global perspectives into teaching, learning, and research, to build international and intercultural competence among students, faculty, and staff, and to establish relationships and collaborations with people and institutions throughout the world. This presentation is the story of how faculty at 3 higher education institutions carried this out across the world's time zones and in the midst of a global pandemic.
For our work together, we followed several definitions. Culture is the pattern of beliefs, behaviors, and values maintained by groups of interacting people and passed to future generations. Intercultural competence is the ability to accurately understand and adapt behavior to cultural differences and commonalities.
Since 2010, I've taught a specific course for pre-service teachers called Human Relations in a Multicultural Society. The theoretical foundation for the course design was the intercultural development continuum with 5 orientations to other cultures. The developmental stages range from monocultural through transition to intercultural. For regular evaluation of the course, I used the Intercultural Development Inventory. Data analysis over the years showed no statistically significant differences in beginning orientations among undergraduate students. As a group, these young students were more likely to minimize cultural differences and emphasize human commonalities. Students were likely to overly apply universal values and principles. And furthermore, these students tended to overlook opportunities to understand their own cultural privileges or to treat others according to the other's cultural norms. After establishing this incoming baseline of cultural competence, I realized that the students had very few relationships with persons from cultures they perceive as different than their own. So I made a major course revision to require experience and reflection with a buddy in a cultural partnership. Students were guided to connect with other students on campus from cultures different than their own. This strategy was used for the in-person campus-based course since 2012. But in spring 2020, a pandemic forced the course to be delivered online, and in-person cultural partnerships were no longer possible. A professor from American University in Yerevan, Armenia, saw my plea for help on a Facebook page and agreed to connect his students with my students.
For this investigation, our research questions were about the impact of virtual internet-based cultural partnerships. Did students improve their perceived cultural competence? Did students improve their developmental orientation to cultural differences and similarities? Did the gap between perceived and developmental orientation change from the beginning to the end of the semester? The IDI is a psychometric instrument demonstrated to be consistent across gender, ethnicity, and education level, with a strong correlation to increase others and more standardized skills. The IDI has subscales that align with the continuum stages.
Data analysis in spring 2020 found that students had statistically significant positive changes in the perceived and the developmental orientations. The difference in the orientation gap was not statistically significant.
Since Dr. Sandell was on sabbatical during the academic 2020-2021 school year, I taught the course. And due to the pandemic, in-person cultural partnerships continued to be problematic. I developed a course-based partnership with Professor Olson, who is teaching Alaska Christian College's interpersonal communication course. We agreed to partner with Virtual Connections in order to deepen students' knowledge and practice intercultural communication skills. The students at Alaska Christian College were Alaska Native Indigenous peoples. Many of the Alaska Native students were identified as English limited language learners. Their first oral languages may have been Yupik, Siberian Yupik, Chupik, or Nupiaq. Students at Mankato were primarily European American who grew up in the Midwest region of the continental United States. Individual students were not matched with individual partners. Rather, the classes interacted online. We created a private Facebook page to facilitate intergroup communication. Students submitted reflection papers to describe their experiences and reactions to these virtual cultural partnerships. One student wrote, "Participating in this partnership forced me to take a step back and analyze my own culture and how it impacts my activities and beliefs." Another student wrote, "This experience has opened my eyes to an entirely different world. Just because someone is different than your normal group of friends does not mean that they are bad or wrong in what they believe."
Results of spring 2020 pre-instruction and post-instruction assessment suggested a virtual cross-cultural partnership made statistically significant positive changes in the U.S. students' cultural competence, especially in terms of their developmental orientation to cultural differences and similarities. Challenges in this project included understanding collective as well as individualistic cultures, language barriers even among American citizens, level of tolerance for unpredictability, and the capacity to suppress inappropriate behavior. Benefits included a deeper perspective of how to work with people of different backgrounds in order to have fun, be creative, and reach common goals.
Additional analysis may provide more insight into the impact of virtual cultural partnerships on students' orientation toward cultural differences and similarities. Future research may examine the change among students who have on-campus cultural partnership experiences compared with change among students who have a virtual experience. For sure, we are going to build on these experiences and incorporate virtual cultural partnerships into our teaching and learning strategies. This concludes our 2021 end presentation, and we thank you for your attention.
If you have questions or comments, please do contact me at the email shown on your screen. Again, thank you for joining us.